off the mark. Gather round sovereigns, we're navigating our pineal glands with Meeks, Kali, and Tootie Odin, reclaiming our native lands. We're off the mark.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of Off the Mark. I think we are on episode 14 of Off the
15.
Mark. 15. Oh my goodness. We've been like
Belting them out there.
Let's do this. On today's episode, Miss Kelly, how are you, by the way, before we get there?
I'm doing fabulous, Miss Tootie. You look amazing. Gorgeous as always.
As for you. So we're gonna get right into it because I'm kind of excited about this one. We're gonna do a review. We're gonna do the review of the movie Soul, Disney Pixar Soul, which came out in 2020, just a few weeks ago, actually. I think it was around Christmas time.
Yep.
It just came out, right?
It's Christmas Day release.
Christmas Day release. Oh, okay, sweet. Yeah, a nice, beautifully wrapped present.
Exclusively on Disney Plus. You may have noticed it because they had the advertisements on the little sidebars of the Roku and in places that I didn't know you could advertise. There were for Soul.
Everywhere but behind our eyelids.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. I thought this movie was it was good. It was well done. It was anyway. So we'll get there. But it stars Jamie Foxx, Tina Fey, Questlove. There's a couple of people in here that I didn't even know were there. Angela Bassett, Richard Ayoade. I never know. I never could figure out his name. Phylicia Rashad. There's so many names, and then there's a couple of child actors who I've never even heard of. But I wondered while watching the movie if they were actually using children or not, and that was legit. This movie was great.
Oh yeah, they had.
Yeah. So, what are your
did.
like when you first saw it?
I was impressed. I was anticipating it for a while, so I knew that it was coming out and everything. And but yeah, on Christmas Day, I watched it right on the day that it released, and I was really impressed with some of the imagery that they used, and that it really seemed to correspond with a lot of the ancient teachings and traditions from around the world that we've been studying over the years, from different Hindu or Sanskrit philosophies and things like that, or Edgar Cayce. From it really melded all these different facets and presented it in such a succinct way. It was really beautiful, I thought.
I agree. It was well done. Okay, here's my only gripe is that the story itself it didn't have too much depth because they were busy putting a message out there. So it had this interesting balance of like the ending. It had deflated scenes in some areas, but because they were focused more on getting a message out than they were making it funny and making it, clownish and cartoonish, the way a normal Disney movie would soften the blow when bringing a hard message. They didn't really do too much of that in this movie that I noticed. I think it was even a debate as to whether it was even made for kids to begin with, because it was so deep.
Yeah, it did get a lot of backlash and criticism for the way that it presented death, and especially with Joe's reaction to it, that he was frightened by death, and so that you kind of put children through that. And as I showed it to my child and my and other children that I've sat with, that I debated, how they would perceive it, or whether they would enjoy it, or if it would be scary or not to them. So thankfully, they all enjoyed and took to the movie too. But it is a bit of a question, but it's true that death is a part of life, and it's important for us to talk about that subject, so it doesn't have to be scary. And it's not like it's new to Pixar. They had Coco, so that we've already touched on the subject of death, or even Hercules. He died and was resurrected. So it's not, and in any of the Disney or Pixar movies, there's often a villain that gets defeated and killed in horrific ways. So it's funny to criticize death just because it shows what happens after, but not the act of death itself. Like, as long as they die and you sweep it under the rug and the body is gone and you don't have to see any of the blood or gore, then it's okay if it happens. If a character just gets exploded or whatever at the end, or gets chopped up in a like airplane propeller like they did in The Incredibles, then it's fine because like it's swept away and it's off screen and now here's the heroes. But for some reason to see a character's emotionally and, you know, soul journey, that's more offensive, or it's more controversial, I guess, because it is ultimately tying to like our religions, you know, and our sense of where we come from and where we're going to. So it's big topics to present to children, definitely.
From a more secular parental standpoint, do you think it was the idea that maybe a movie like this would traumatize the kids? Because I I felt that way about Coco almost in a sense, except that when they tied the end of the movie, the end of Coco together, it was wrapped up very, very beautifully and it was
Mhm.
very, you know, so it was, they, like I said, they softened the blow most of the time on issues like that. Um, but I didn't see any of that in this one. Not that it was not that it was blunt by any means, but I didn't see any. It's okay, you know what I mean. Um, I saw this movie end with purpose.
Yeah. Yeah. And even with him coming back to life, they didn't, I think they still did it in a reverent way where it wasn't disparaging death either. It wasn't saying that death is bad and thank goodness he's alive again so that now he doesn't have to be there. But it was more just that he had more experience left to acquire, that there was more there, but it was that all in due season that he would still return to the great beyond eventually. So there was still like that knowing.
So if you haven't seen this movie, and I'm assuming if you're interested in this review, you have, but if you have not seen it, the movie is about a very, very talented jazz musician who is a school teacher, a middle school or high school teacher. And he, you know, it seems like he's hit a wall. He has a mundane routine and he just seems very, very stuck in his position, but very, very talented, loves to he plays jazz piano and he very often gets lost in his playing because he's so good at it. Um, he finally gets his big break with a very famous jazz musician, local jazz musician there. I don't, is it in New York? Are they based in real life New York? I don't remember.
Oh, I believe so.
Yeah, I think so. So
It's been a beat since we watched the.
yeah, a little bit. Well, there's been a lot going on too.
Yeah.
So yeah, he finally gets his big break. He's happy. He's stoked about it. He leaves the jazz club. You know, get pumped, ready to play. I think he's going to play even that evening. As he's walking home, all kinds of accidental mishaps start to happen around him, kind of like an omen or like a forewarning. Like, hey, bro, like watch your footing. You're going to get hurt. You know. So eventually he gets hurt. He falls into a manhole and he dies. They don't really show him die. They just show him turning into this blue light that manifests onto this legit conveyor belt that takes him to the great beyond.
A black
So
void with a lit bridge that goes to, you know, heads
it's
towards the light.
also been said that people who have experienced near-death experiences have experienced these types of experiences that this movie actually portrayed. So as Disney does, they did a lot of research and I assume being a touchy subject, I'm sure it wasn't easy to talk to a lot of people who have experienced near-death traumas. Um, but according to a lot of resources and folks who have been interviewed who have had near-death experiences, the experiences in this movie are almost nailed, like legit. So that's just really, really interesting to know,
Mhm.
to note. But anyway, so he realizes he's in the great beyond, and he also discovers I don't belong here. I have things to do still. I got things to get done down there. So he does
Tonight.
it to escape. He tries to escape from going into the great beyond. So anyway, so mishaps ensue. They give him another chance to go back down to earth. He meets I don't know what they're called. She's a soul, right? 22. Introduce her a little bit because you probably know more about her than I do.
Yeah, so after Joe's on the conveyor belt and or the bridge to the light, and he decides that he wants to still live, he presses through one of the force fields, and that's even interesting to think of what it was that allowed him to permeate that wall than other beings. But we'll go into more of the details of it later. But anyways, he ends up in a different realm, which is called the Great Before. So it's the birthplace of the souls, and it's where they develop they achieve their spark so that they can complete their earth pass, which gives them the ability or allows them to go and incarnate into a body as their soul on earth. So as Joe arrives in this realm, he's almost immediately kind of are introduced to a character, Jerry, which is the title of a lot of different characters in this realm of the Great Before. And Jerry describes himself as a construct that's just presenting in a way that his feeble human mind could understand. But they mistake him for a mentor for the souls that basically prepares the souls to find their spark so that they can incarnate and finish their earth path. And so Joe gets paired with soul 22, which is a very early number. So you can imagine in all the people and humans that have incarnated in all of time, that 22 has been there presumably for quite some time. And 22 was having problems finding their spark and was basically afraid or resistant to completing their earth path and incarnating. So they wanted to stay perpetually in this stage of the Great Before. And yeah, so as they're paired together, Joe tries to take that opportunity and usurp 22's incarnation and take that for himself instead. They go to find a place kind of beyond the Great Before called the Zone, which is a place where it's tethered to the present moment on Earth. So they are able to interact with different souls and entities that are in their zone or kind of in their meditative transcendental state on Earth. And they meet some I don't know how you'd call them, navigators of the zone who are still alive, but are able through their consciousness to be in this area as well. And so they help with their wand to open a portal that allows Joe and 22 to drop back into Earth simultaneously in the present moment. But instead of Joe returning to his own physical body, he incarnates into a cat, Mr. Mittens, who was a therapy cat in a hospital where his body was taken to after falling in the manhole, and the soul 22 incarnates in Joe's body. So initially it's very traumatic to soul 22 because they didn't want to be on Earth at all, and now they're having to be dropped right into a body that, you know, is already old and developed and has just experienced trauma, and, you know, they have to escape from the hospital. Joe wants to get them switched back so that he can be in his own human body by the evening so that he can play this concert with his idol and basically fulfill his dream or his destiny or what he perceives to be his purpose on Earth. And as they're going throughout the day in all their little errands to achieve that, 22 gets to experience all these different elements of what it is to be alive and things that you couldn't experience in the Great Before or the Hall of Everything, this like training arena for pre-souls or developing souls, that here on Earth, Soul 22, as this kind of like catch 22, that they were finally able to smell, taste, and touch and experience life in such a way that it did trigger their soul. So as they're going through all these different errands, they come to a time where they meet the character Moonwind, who was in the zone. They met the soul in the zone, and then they had to meet the real person on the earth plane in the present time. And he was going to help them do some type of ritual so that the souls could swap in this like little Freaky Friday type aspect of the movie too. But at the last moment, 22 decides that they are on the right track, that they do want to incarnate, and they're just like at the precipice of finding their spark, and that they need more time, and they're not willing to transfer the body over to Joe instead. And so then they kind of battle out for it. Joe ends up doing the transfer, and 22 is sent back to the Great Before and feels like they'll never incarnate again. Eventually, after playing, and Joe achieves his dream of getting a standing gig with his idol, and he's going to officially be a professional jazz musician, which is the thing that he's been chasing his entire life, that he thought, once I achieve this, then I'll arrive, then I can be happy, then I'll be successful, then I'll be you know, worthy in the eyes of my friends and family and community at long last. But after he plays the concert, even though everyone is amazed by him, he did phenomenally well. He achieved his goal. He's finding this empty space beyond it. So through him returning to the zone as he's playing at home, he's able to reconnect with 22, and they basically are able to inspire 22 to find their spark, complete their Earth pass, and the movie ends with 22 returning to Earth, or jumping into Earth and incarnating as a person for the first time. So finally achieved what no other mentor for all those centuries could do. And then in gratitude, or just that they accredit Joe that they themselves felt inspired, the spirits and creatures that worked in the great before, and so they give him another chance at life. So he gets to reincarnate, and with a new appreciation for every day that he has remaining and being alive. So it ends on a beautiful message of like finding your purpose, of that it's the little things. Like 22 mentions that they're really enjoying walking and looking at the stars, and Joe says, oh, that's not a purpose, that's just ordinary everyday living. So things that seem so mundane and that we often take for granted, they point to what an incredible achievement it is that we as human creatures embodied with soul are able to function and appreciate these faculties of life. So it's beautiful, the things that it points to as they go through their day. 22 collects an assortment of treasures, like a lollipop that they got, and a little flower petal that wafted in the wind and landed on their hand, and things like that that are, seemingly innocuous, but it was the treasures that 22 collected, and it was like the sum of their embodiment for that day, their memory.
Yeah, the movie made me fall like a baby.
Right?
Oh. Yeah, big time. Also,
it reminded.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. It reminded me a lot of. Now I'm gonna butcher it. I forget the name of the play, but it's like Our Town, and the end of the play is basically, do humans ever notice that they're living life while they're living it, like every single second? So it had a very like esque of that, just appreciating the moments. But yeah,
that was basically the biggest message in the movie. Just living your moment. That's your purpose, is just to live your moment. And yeah, man. I think one of the greatest things to me about it, and I think what got me the most, besides the ending, was when they go to the great before, and it got me because they the way they were explaining the way the great before works is that this is you, this is who you've always been, this is where you've always been. And when you correlate that to the way life is now, we base life so much on our past and on our we let things that happen to us, or things we've done as far as mistakes or decisions are concerned, we let those things define who we are. And the great before is basically reminding me I should probably say, is that we aren't moving on from the past. We were never defined by it. It's never there to begin with. You know what I mean? It's hard to explain, but the way it got me, I was in tears. You know what I mean? Because I've always understood that, this movie's called Soul. I've always understood that once the soul meets its purpose, it has no reason to be here. And the only reason why I started to believe that is because after losing my dad, there was no other explanation as to why he was taken. He was a good man. He was young. He led a good life. There was so much good about him that there's no reason in God's good earth why life would be like his should have left so early. So I had to figure out exactly how to explain that to myself, because that again, that's a traumatic experience, as you know yourself. The only thing I can think was that well maybe he was just done. Maybe he served his purpose. What else is he gonna learn? He learned everything he had to learn. He used his knowledge and to inspire and influence many other people. And that's what we're here to do. You know, we're just here to live, and that's what we're here to do. And he did it. And again, and this movie kind of brings that back and reminds me that's, you know, physically he was here and physically we're here, but this was never us to begin with. All he did was his soul came here for its purpose, and it went back to where it has to go, or to where it belongs. And
Right.
this movie that's where it brought me to. It brought me back to the days of his passing, um and it really blew me away to understand that maybe these things happen physically here on earth, other traumas, you know, but they're not a part of me. They're not a part of us. They're not things that we have to take with us all the time. You know
Mm.
what I mean? And they're
They
not
don't have
things,
to define us and
right?
characterize us.
We don't have to keep reliving them and reliving them via it's through just depression, or whether it's through self-defense, or whether it's through um, whatever the case. It's something that we feel it's our purpose to keep those things with us at all times, in one way or another, whether it's to guard ourselves from ever feeling it again, or
Mhm.
to or just simply because it's something we can't let go. So yeah, it really, the great before, the scene with the great before, just it got me big time. It's like, oh man, this isn't me. Like, that's me. You know, the person who I'm
Right.
supposed to go back to. It just really got me as an adult. And I know it's a heavier message for kids, but I don't understand. We're not in their minds. We don't know what they soak in. So I just thought it was really beautiful. It was one of the best scenes of the movie to me.
I love that. It's interesting that you mentioned that because I think that kids do relate to so many aspects of this movie, even if they don't have like the language to put it into words necessarily or to articulate it, how they're feeling or processing it. They're closer to that time of being on that side. So part of them like does have that like recognition and remembrance of it. But yeah, it was beautiful how vast the great before was. And it's like that quote that we're not a human having a soulful experience, but we're a soul having a human experience. And so it just like alludes to that. And there's a great like fluidity to it of even how they drop into the great before, like they're ushering out of that building or the schoolhouse where the souls are born, almost like a fountain. And then the way it like kind of pools down, how there's like this portal where you can see this opening ring and there's earth down below, and all the souls are all around the ring falling and dropping down through the portal onto earth. And then once you're on earth, that you're even dropped into this bridge that then flows up into this light. And there's just like this, ethereal current that takes you through all these like stages and motions, kind of like you're just flowing down the river of life. But then at the same time, when you're in the great before, they were beyond time, just like 22 was able to have all those mentors that spread through so much, like space of earth history, but it was in such like a concentrated place where it just felt like the same day over and over again to 22, to the point of boredom almost. But comfort and how we can get stuck in our comforts. But yeah, even as you're mentioning of like fulfilling your purpose, it's interesting the way that they even had Joe die, that a lot of characters, especially parents or earlier characters, die from sickness or something like that in Disney movies. So it was interesting for him to die suddenly and unexpected, but I guess that's part of the aspect even of him not being prepared or ready for it. But that he fell down a manhole, which is such classic to cartoons, to when like Wile E. Coyote and stuff, and they don't actually get hurt, but like the falling down a manhole. But then also even the manhole itself is kind of like a portal. So it's almost like when he was walking down the street and ignoring all these signs of potential danger that were like hearkening him to like perk up, pay attention, like be on guard, and you could sidestep these potential dangers. But it was almost like he was in this pre-zone of his like premeditated, almost predestined, I guess, death, that he was like being drawn into that manhole, you could say. But then they did still decide that it wasn't his time. So that's an interesting thing that brings us to is a character in the story is Terry, who's in charge of counting all the souls that process through. So he's keeping a record of every soul that is transitioning from Earth into the great beyond, and that's on that conveyor belt, and knows how many souls are supposed to go through that per day, per hour, per minute. So he was almost able to tell almost instantaneously when the count was off, and that Joe, or not that Joe specifically, but just in general, that a soul or an entity of energy like that, because it's interesting what even triggered him to know that the count was off and that he had to guess and didn't know the specific character of them, but just could feel like the energetic absence, I guess, that it didn't pull into the sun and be recycled.
Don't they end up making him feel like he's crazy because he knows it's missing, but like they're like they're trying to pull it off. That's yeah, that was pretty. He's probably one of my favorites because of that.
I'll get to the bottom of this. But yeah, they even mentioned that the count hasn't been off in centuries, so that's a lot of the speculation too of like who threw off the count then previously. And so of course, like from if you have a Christian background, you might assume that sort of Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, maybe. Or if you're like tying it only to the Pixar world and universe, then what of those characters could it have possibly been to trigger it off? But anyways, this is a very rare thing. So what even is it that allows or permits Joe to permeate that wall, that barrier that was on each side of the conveyor belt, that all the other souls seem fairly complicit to it, that they were just like standing in place. They weren't like cutting in line or running the other way as he was. They were all just in their time and in their place, going along towards their destiny, I guess, or their post destiny. But I wondered even if it was hard to like freeze it just right on the clip, but I wondered if he even did some type of sigil, or it's how he was pressing his hands, if they like formed in a particular way that was kind of like a key that unlocked it for him to be able to go through these realms. Because it's interesting that that's another aspect that they touch on of the spirit world, or basically whatever's on the other side of the veil of this material realm that we experience, that they do show that it's made up of light and symbols, and it has almost like a Tron-esque kind of aesthetic to it. But then that the great before still had like these meadows and looked like grass and like nature still, so that those kind of elements of were eternal or universal, I guess. But yeah, another thing that interested me was even 22, that they chose that number of all numbers to be the number of the soul. And numerology is an entire science of kind of like the quality of numbers and how they actually relate to the world around us. And they say that God is a mathematician, and that there's God's signature in a lot of, if you just look in nature and how we're built, and the Fibonacci code and all of those kinds of things. So numerology and the measurement of that kind of energy of what 22 could signify. And as I pull it up.
So we're getting into Easter eggs. I didn't get to segue, but yeah, that's what we're essentially, that's what we're doing right now, which I kind of couldn't wait to dig deep into.
A little bit, and this is kind of like maybe not the intentional fan level of of Easter eggs, but yeah. So the angel number 22 symbolizes reasons, significance, it symbolizes you're on the path towards greater balance and harmony in life, and being able to manifest whatever you focus on and flow your energy towards. So that correlates with finding your spark and finding your purpose and being on the right path. And even for 22 to take so long to incarnate, that maybe the person that 22 needed to have that experience and mentoring from Joe of all souls. So it's even drawing into part of that being Joe's soul or purpose was to have this journey into the afterlife and encounter 22.
And much the same, maybe 22 has been stuck there all throughout time, and his purpose was to meet Joe this entire
Right.
time. Can you imagine number 22, the 22nd soul ever made or ever created or ever to exist, and it's just that's really cool. Like they were waiting there this entire time, and then all of a sudden here comes Joe.
Right. And it's like that thing that you didn't know that you needed. And they have this place in the Great Before called the Hall of Everything, which has all the things of that you could possibly enjoy of Earth, but you have to experience it without the senses of being able to taste or touch or smell. And that's another like place where they have a lot of Easter eggs. It's where they have the Pizza Planet truck and the one code and stuff like that. So there's a lot of Easter eggs in that section, but yeah, that it also readdresses even what soulmates can be like in a lot of the marketing or products and stuff that they had. They did a play on words with soulmates for a lot of it, and which is kind of uncomfortable because 22 is kind of a child and Joe's kind of an adult, and they're being soulmates. Disney. But also just that a soulmate, it also de-romanticizes, which Disney has been kind of doing through their last couple of films, of not having this like epitome of your life be finding like this partner that you're going to love and marry and drive off into the sunset. That your soulmate or purpose could be something just of like coming into contact with somebody, even for however brief of time, and that the matedness is the impact that it has on you rather than the control or possession that you have over another person or what they do for you extendedly. So that was another beautiful element, I thought. But yeah, anything you want to say from?
Yeah, just to play off what you just said. Yeah, it releases the attachment. Joe kind of uses 22 to get back to Earth.
Mm-hmm.
Right? 22 essentially gets talked into it, but uses Joe to experience Earth. But they become so enthralled with each other's existence because they need those reverse roles in order to be able to interact the way they are.
Mm-hmm.
So that attachment, once it's that attachment that creates conflict, that attachment that essentially leaves Joe to tell 22, hey, piss off, like, you don't even belong here anyway. So, essentially they break, and then it isn't until that break happens that that Joe ends up realizing, much after his show, after he plays his big jazz show, that attachment was meaningless. It was a driving force that had no real purpose behind it. Once he was able to let go of that attachment to that soul or that other entity, was when he was able to, I guess for me personally, let go of it. Was an ego thing.
Right. Yeah, the ego death. Yeah.
Yeah. So once that happened, he was able to. I think you already reiterated it. He was playing the piano and he was reconnecting into the zone, which is how he was able to reconnect with 22. Mm-hmm. In that reconnection, he asks 22 for forgiveness, basically, and he humbles himself, and in that it breaks this attachment, and then they become two individual souls that are now balanced and able to interact with each other. And through that, is when they both come back to Earth. I think they both come back to Earth as one, right?
No, Joe gets to relive as his own body as if he hadn't had the accident, and I don't know how they explained the hospital visit and all that, but and poor Mr. Mittens, what a night he had. It's been a night. And then 22 gets to incarnate for the first time because they're ready.
Yeah,
it's really beautiful. And there's even like some speculation of who that character is going to be, or who 22 incarnates as.
Who do you think?
Well, I had no clue, but Super Carlin Brothers is a phenomenal channel for all things like Disney and Pixar, and they had some guesses. One was Mei Lee, who is going to be the star character in Turning Red, which is their next Pixar movie that's coming out in 2022. And that it takes place in Asia, and that's like the area of Earth that's facing upwards as 22 is plummeting down. So that's a potential. They also guessed, and not to spoil their video, like definitely go if you're interested in this topic. I'm not trying to steal it from them, but go watch their video and see all the details of why they came up to these conclusions. But another guess was Colette from Ratatouille, and they base that off of the characteristics that they describe 22 as they're in that U seminar place, which is where you train and to find your spark. So 22 is described as an extroverted, moody cynic who's extremely punctual. And so they took different clips from Colette in Ratatouille to resemble all those qualities. They also, yeah. And then another one they thought of could be Russell from Up, which also had like a very mentor child and needing to like complete your badge with your like last activity and things like that. One thing I find interesting though is that when they are in the Great Before, that one of the main Jerrys, when talking about 22, does refer to 22 as a she, her, to Joe, which is saying that before souls have even incarnated for a one time, an initial time, that they are potentially engendered, which was a very daring choice for Disney to make. And I don't know if that was like perhaps incidental, and the like recording artist for that line just happened to say it because they're thinking, oh, Tina Fey is like voicing it, and they just didn't want to say they, or it was uncomfortable and it just slipped out and they missed it in editing. I don't know. But when they're referring to 20, or if it was intentional and they're just like, take from it what you will, audience. But that's interesting that you can be a gender before you've had a body. So it's not like incarnating in a body is the thing that assigns you a gender. But then when 22 first incarnates, when her and Joe are dropped into it, she incarnates in Joe's body, which means that she was a feminine soul in a masculine body, presumably. So that also could mean that that doesn't necessarily mean based on the body that you're living on in Earth doesn't necessarily have to match the gender specific soul within you. But that also could be because they didn't go through that main portal where all the new souls were like, going down the dish and jumping down onto Earth. The first time when they go with Joe in 22 is when they're in the zone area and they discover Moonwind, and he opens that portal with the wand and tells them to focus on their crown chakra and all these great little esoteric little Easter eggs they toss in there. And that's how they re-enter the portal. So that could be the difference of what allowed 22 to embody in a male or a masculine body, even as a feminine soul, is because she didn't like birth through that same like canal that all the new souls did. So I don't know if that's like always to say that was Disney's like anthology or pathology or whatever of how that works, that if the gender would match the soul when they're first birthed, or however that's supposed to be, or if like once you incarnate once. They didn't quite go into what happens once you're recycled into that light of the great beyond, if that means that your soul gets a new chance at a new body, or and you go through you get your earth pass again, or if you're just done and you get to be in the heaven. It was clever that when Joe does arrive in the Great Before and he asks Jerry, Jerry does clarify this isn't heaven, that it was the Great, that this is a very specific different place. So that's wonderful that they didn't necessarily like claim to know or envision any specifics around that, because it is very impressionable too, because it does create such a scope of the before life, and heaven, the after, or like the afterlife, and your time on earth. So it does kind of create this religious experience for children, I guess, especially for those who haven't already had a foundation in that sense,
Right. Right.
beyond a secular, like scientific one.
What did you think about the Jerrys? Um, I, I found it interesting that there's more than one Jerry,
Yeah,
and I found it well they were gods. You know, the
right.
Jerrys were omen or oracles or gods or
Yeah.
whatever you want to call them. And you know, like you said, it brings a religious aspect to it in a sense, because regardless of whatever God, even if a lot of kids may not be brought up in any type of religion these days, but if they are, their God was there. You know what I mean? Which
Mhm.
all of the Jerrys are essentially all of the gods that we believe in, be it Jesus, be it Buddha, be it whatever higher power it is. That's how I saw them. That's how I perceive them as just
Yeah.
you know, the higher beings that all of us, our souls tend to attach to. So yeah, that was kind of cool.
Yeah, I love that they had that element character of the Jerrys and that they did share the same name and that they were like egoless in that sense, that they didn't have any other purpose but in the service of the souls and that flowing river of existence and life, and that they were that they didn't need their own title and identity. And yet Terry, who did have a slightly different name, he did need that recognition. You know, he still did need that like work, and that was the only thing that set him off, was once they like praised him and said he was doing a good job, then he was like satisfied and could get that itch off his back. So so he still was distinguished from them. But it's interesting, even though you use the name Jerry, because it sounds so like commonplace, like Bob or what, I don't know, Jerry. But I looked it up, and Jerry actually means may Jehovah exalt, or the Lord exalted, or
Wow.
yeah, or it also can mean the spearhead. So like spearheading this
Wow.
like piece of existence. So it's like a very like yeah, biblical name, and of course like correlates with Jeremiah and things like that. But also touching on that they were kind of almost like angels, and that in like astrotheology, angels are representative of angles of light, that the universe and all that were, you know, in the beginning there was light and sound, and we're even astro and quantum physicists have proven that we're just like different fields of vibration and light, essentially. So that they were kind of like that in its purest element and form, and that they were all kind of operating out of this field of oneness, or God, like in totality, but kind of being like the fingertips of God, where like your hand is still you, but it's not like your hand can't do all the things that you are doing, or your hand's not making the choices for you, but it still like does all the work, you know, and is like touching all the pieces that you are able to transfer your intention into. So it felt kind of like the fingers and hands of God touching all the souls and like exalting them and then sending them on their way into earth. And then even when the very first Jerry presents themselves to Joe, they do like this little flash sequence of where they show some of their other forms, and it's like this beautiful like kaleidoscope of like sacred geometry, and that ultimately that's like our true form in essence, because our cells and stuff are structured in these different flowering cyclical Vesicus Pisces circles. So like flower of life type symbols. So yeah, the Jerrys were such an incredible character, and like their beingness and oneness, and even how they had such a peace and calm, and even when there's like a disturbance, that like they had that faith and like knowledge that all would be well and that everything was okay and all of that. Yes, it was a wonderful element. Yeah, and I love that Disney and Pixar did take this opportunity to touch on, because obviously that's kind of like a theme throughout Pixar movies. They're like known for being those tear jerkers, like being able to like really cut to the heart of of you know the human experience, and they've been toying with this in different ways with like Inside Out and exploring our emotions, and then with Coco, as we mentioned, and having their afterlife version. But I think that even creates an interesting element of how those can both simultaneously exist in the Pixar universe. And it was evident in Coco that it was very particular to the culture that and how they were remembrance and stuff like that. So the world was a reflection of their living experience and the memories that were presented and surrounding them from the living people in their current state. So it makes sense that like the world of the dead would be a mirror of the living, but also how Coco had that aspect of the final death, so that you got to be in this land of the dead for a while until the last person from the world of the living had forgotten you, and then you faded out into a final death. So it's interesting to even consider that, of that escalator bridge to the light that Joe was on, if that represents before the final death, like is that where the souls sit and kind of exist during their final death, but then their imagination can be off in some place. And maybe that's even why some of the souls that were on that conveyor belt were so calm and at peace, because maybe their imagery or existence, their visualization was similar to Coco, but it relating to their culture or their religion of whatever their version of heaven and afterlife would be, for as long as they were being remembered. And maybe Joe, because he was shocked by it, that he got to see behind the veil because he didn't see his version of heaven or something. I don't know.
He didn't see too many characters that were losing it the way Joe was either.
Yeah.
Like everybody else was pretty content and comfortable, and some of them were even excited.
Yeah.
You know? So yeah, he seemed to be the only one that was like, no, this can't happen, and this isn't happening to me right now. And yeah, that is pretty cool, pretty interesting to I didn't think that far into it, but yeah, that's good stuff.
And then also maybe with like the final death, if the conveyor belt is supposed to be where the souls go to after they've had their final death, so they already had their like afterlife experience, and then this is the final like sweep of we're going to recycle your energy in that in the light. Maybe Joe went straight to that conveyor belt because people didn't know that he had died yet, so it was almost like of a living forgetfulness, because maybe he wasn't on anybody's mind at that time or something. I don't know, but it's just
limbo, right? But
yeah, so maybe even that's what allowed him to permeate the realms. But another interesting thing it calls into question is Joe being able to incarnate in Mr. Mittens when he and 22 fell. And again, this is like an extraordinary circumstance because they went through the separate portal from the zone rather than through that earth portal, the official one at the U seminar where souls are supposed to be born. So, and they also showed that section where 22 would mess with the different bubbles of people in real time with the present earth, and like mess up their basketball games or things like that. Yeah. So there could be a bit of that, of just like the permeability of the present moment between all of the realms, that's why a soul could incarnate into any type of creature, but that's not necessarily that a soul from the U seminar would jump off and go into a cat in a normal situation. But it does just call into that of like the relationship of souls, that Mr. Mittens even had a soul and that they cut to that and showed Mr. Mittens on the conveyor belt, or that bridge as well. Yeah. That that they are creatures with souls and have that life and eternal significance in that sense. So that was an interesting concept as well. Is there anything you want to say on that before I go on?
I think for sure that we know about Disney Pixar movies, or basically any movie, to be honest, is what we call predictive programming. Like The Simpsons, if you haven't seen the review, again, I'm gonna plug that. But The Simpsons is known for that. But Disney Pixar in particular, their Easter eggs are phenomenal. And in this movie alone, they don't BS. They don't play games with the message that they're trying to send out in this one. I know you found a handful, especially actual things that they physically say out loud with their own mouths. It's like they're not hinting around to anything. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like, share some of those for me, because you know you have them. But
yeah, like well, a lot, like you said, there's a lot of Easter eggs that they put in there, and a lot of them are traditional too, like Disney and Pixar, and just like at Disneyland or the parks, how they do it like an immersive experience. So sometimes it's just like a little visual thing off to the corner, whether you notice or not. But these particular ones were like, and there's a lot of Easter eggs that they did just in the general overall scaping design of Soul. And like when Terry like falls through the layers of the realms of existence or something, when he goes into like the physical earth and goes through the layers into into the void. So there's a bunch of stuff like that that just kind of flies by and your subconscious takes it in. But these handful of things, it was really interesting that they mentioned that were actual lines and quotes in the film that kind of even correlate to things that we're experiencing this year in 2020 and moving forward, or the last year of 2020 moving forward. So one of my favorites was when 22 is mentioning some of their previous mentors. There's a quote, like my mentor George Orwell used to say, state-sponsored education is like the rattling of a stick inside a swill bucket. And then Connie says, yeah, the girl that was from Joe's class. And 22 continues, the ruling class's core curriculum stifles dissent. It's the oldest trick in the book. And Joe says, what are you talking about? She doesn't care about all that. So he just brushes it off. So they kind of like try to dismiss it. So if you didn't gather from it, don't worry about it. Like, let it be for who it resonates with. But that was an interesting nod to, some of the problems and issues within our education system, and something that we've been facing even this year, or this past year of 2020, as the schools have been closed and a lot of children have been transitioning to an online education or some combination of that, and the hurdles of that, and how the effects or consequences of that style of education as well, if it's making us even more and more kind of like schools used to be more of an industrial age type thing to teach us to be a cog in a wheel and stand in our place in line and wait your turn and raise your hand and all of those kinds of things, that now that it's a different spectrum, now that we're in a more digital age, but just like we've talked in a previous cast of the fourth industrial revolution, that now we're coming into this digital great reset. So it's interesting how the education is transitioning with that, but still along the scale of the Orwellian, like we've mentioned with 1984 and stuff. So that was a very interesting quote for Disney to put into a movie. And they mentioned George Orwell, not just in that quote, but just in general, when they're like listing off some of the previous mentors, or on the wall where you can see all the name tags that 22 had collected. So there was a lot of Easter eggs on that as well. But another one of my favorite quotes from the movie is when Terry is searching for Joe in 22 and accidentally selects the wrong person. Paul, I guess, was the character's name. And when Terry realizes that it's not Joe and that he has the wrong soul, he says, oh, no harm, no foul. Oh boy, look, like I'm thinking there's no reason we can't keep this little incident between us, eh? Mistakes happened and it's not your time. And then he chuckles a bit and he says, unless you keep eating those processed foods, am I right? Because Paul had a bag of potato chips. And then Terry like flips out of that realm and then back in and says, but seriously, stay away from those processed foods. So they don't just like say it once, they like exclamate it where it takes a beat and he's like, no, but seriously, or even his exact words. So it's really communicating that that's, something that's compromising our livelihood, is having processed foods, which is really abundant in our current society, and especially even with the consequences of 2020 and a lot of restaurants being closed, or a lot of people have resulted in having food delivered and stuff like that from a variety of restaurants, or we have gone to more packaged foods that would have a longer shelf life so that you don't have to go out to the market as often and things like that. But there are consequences of that. It's really can be very damaging to our health. And then another one of my favorite ones was when Joe and 22 are on Earth and they're at the end of the day and they're ready to find Moonwind so that they can make the switch. Moonwind is telling them that they have to wait for another thin spot to open between Earth and the astral plane. And that won't occur until Orcus moves into the House of Gemini. And so Joe's like, when is that? He says, well, the government calls it 6:30. So it's so funny that like it nods not only to Moonwind being distrusting of the government, or that they're like putting us into a certain type of like construct of time and limitations. Obviously, he has like a very liberal type job, or like that he's a very free spirit. But yeah, that it's nodding that he's navigating his time, and even his ability to transition to and from the astral plane comes from him being mindful of the stars and the astrological positions and things like that. And it's interesting, in 2020 we also had on the winter solstice the great conjunction of Saturn and Jupiter. So that was, and then 3 days later on Christmas, we had Soul release. And there's even in astrotheology, they nod to that basically on the winter solstice is when the sun is the lowest in the sky of the whole year, which is why it's the longest night of the year. And at that time, the sun is lowest in the horizon, and then it stays down at that height for 3 days. So it's just like it died and stays dead for 3 days. And then on the third day, it rises again, just like in Christianity with Jesus on Christmas Day, which is why the sun is reborn on Christmas in astrotheology. So it's interesting that we had the Great Conjunction, and that's something that on Christmas Day, when the sun rises again, that the Disney Pixar movie is nodding to, and even kind of planting that seed in children's minds of being mindful of the stars and planets and constellations as a means to enter into these more magical space and powers that they might have. So I loved all of those kind of intentional quotes and things that they're kind of cultivating the culture of children. I feel like a lot of both you and I were raised on Disney, and I feel like in a sense it is kind of a school of initiation, that to those that have eyes and ears, let them see and hear, and that it does kind of introduce us to these like Joseph Campbell, like larger archetypal concepts of heroes and villains, and true love conquers all, and all of those kinds of things, and virtue being rewarded, and a greater power, and the magic in the air, and possibility, and all of those kinds of things. So it's interesting that they're utilizing these kind of elements in this new film, and it's kind of setting a bar for where they're going to go with these next movies, of what else they could teach the children.
Well, I have a sidebar. Okay, question.
Yeah.
Okay, so Disney and Pixar, Disney has been doing this for years, but what we see, okay, for example, the FBI's list of pedophilia symbols, they're all over Disney movies.
Right.
They're all over, even things like the monoliths being in Frozen 2, and then like a couple months later, this real life monolith comes out in the news that these kids say, oh, I know what a monolith is now because I saw Frozen. Right. So things like that. Okay. Disney seems to err on the side of good for the majority of their movies. Their message is always something positive, regardless of tragedy. This one in particular nails, I mean, it just nails it on the head with the message they're trying to get out, right? Without really doing that.
It's like such a download, like by watching it, like you get it.
What I don't understand is, what side are they on? Do they have to put this stuff, in order to be to still exist as a company, to pay tribute to the people who are trying to push this agenda, who are in power, who are in charge? Do they have to do that stuff, but at the same time still be able to get out their message? Like, I always wondered, like, where's Disney's heart at with this stuff? Because it seems all well and good until you dig deeper, and then you see these symbols, and you see Soul. I want to say even Soul has a few in the background. I haven't.
Yeah, there's a lot of swirlies.
But yeah, that's what I'm saying. So.
Yeah, actually, I do have some thoughts on that, and you're right that even with Soul, that, like, I think as we were mentioning earlier, that Joe is essentially an adult, and his companion or soulmate is this child. So, take of that what you will. And then in some of, I didn't notice too many references, except for that, like 22's first food is pizza, and that they have it in the spirit realm first, and it means nothing to them. And then they have it in the carnal world on Earth, and all of a sudden, like, they explode with experience. So, like, pop their food cherry, a little bit. So there's things like that. And then even on some of the merchandise of Soul, they have a pajama set for children where it says my sole purpose is pizza and has these little swirly doos all over it. And like, yeah, if you look at the FBI list of pedophilic symbols of how they're able to communicate with each other and stuff, there's very intentional symbols that just so happen to appear in the Disney animation. So we do live in like this Maya matrix where we have this duality of the good and evil and stuff. And so it's kind of two-faced where it's like, are they good doing bad or bad doing good? Right. And because like karmically, they have to, those that know that they have to offset their bad deeds for the sake of their immortal souls by giving people a way out. So that way we're contracting with them that if we then take it in, that it's our fault that we agreed with that. So if they like the message was love and truth, but then there happened to be like these subliminal messages, like, in Lion King where they have sex written in the stars, but they claim it was SFX as a nod to like the special effects that they were doing. No kid will misread this. This won't have any later consequence. No one said, no, don't do that. Bad idea. Whoever did it. Or like there's different things like that, or like on the Lion King, even poster, movie cover or movie poster, they have in the sun and set how it looks like the back of a woman that's topless and has her underwear because it's supposed to be Mufasa's like kind of shadow in the clouds, but like the lion's nose is like the her underwear, and then like the rest of his face and stuff is her legs, and then his mane is her back and his hair and stuff like that. So there's definitely things like that they put in there, and it's so intentional that it's not by accident. Like Rescue Rangers, they have the woman undressing in the background as they're flying by. There's like loads of examples of this. So it's a question of, are they karmically, that was their intention, was to introduce these kind of concepts and stuff to kids, and then they're comically offsetting that by putting it under a good message, so that way if the parents choose to show it to their children, then that's on you, then you did that to them, but parents think like, oh, it's a princess, or like, oh, they beat the dragon and get married at the end and they learn confidence or something. Like, this is a great movie, I'm going to show it to my child. And then it's on the parents' like karmic fault that we showed them those images and program their subconscious in that way. Or it could very well be that Disney is a well-intentioned company that has become so powerful by the nature of its virtue and creativity and all these good things and magic that it honors, that it had to be compromised and infiltrated and usurped with
like Michael Jackson.
Right, that I'm sure there was a bunch of like spies or people that could have easily been hired as animators, like play their part for the sake of, when they're trusted enough and have this opportunity, then they utilize it, and whatever systems were in place that they were able to get those by. And if you get enough people in there, then it's not going to get checked or questioned. And then if they have to backtrack and figure out, weeding out who the inappropriate people are, then and Disney doesn't want to have to admit to having stuff like having hired people like that, although Disney does have a record of, especially this year, even with they broke up like child trafficking rings and stuff in Florida.
One thing I did learn about Walt Disney himself historically that I didn't know is that he was like gung-ho diehard patriot, like super, like something that I never thought he was. He had a lot of firsts. He had a lot of women artists back then. Mm-hmm. Basically, if you were good at your job, I'm going to hire you. That was his outlook. He had some of the first Black cartoonists back then. I mean, he was just an all-American guy. Very anti-communist, like super. He was one of those like Grandpa Simpson, like everyone's a commie,
Yeah.
But the thing is,
he read Scared Hard.
Well, he has there's a cartoon of Donald Duck, and I think he's getting ready to go to war. I believe it's World War II, and mm-hmm. they have that poster in the back that says, or he's getting a checkup, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because the poster, it's the eye test where it's the letters and then they get smaller and smaller. Right. But in the letters it spells out, ask about Illuminati. Like,
ask about Illuminati.
Ask about Illuminati. Mm-hmm. It's like, well, that's kind of what, again, kids, this is a kid's cartoon, from the 50s or 60s. So
And
the
that was,
message
from the
is
50s or
about that.
60s. It's not even like playing off of now during
Right.
that
And
some
the
like
conspiracy-
millennial, conspiracy guy got in there or something. Like this is one of those older films. Yeah. So there's definitely that aspect too. And for those that know about like Club 33 at Disneyland, and
Right.
a lot of people do believe it's on record of Walt Disney being a Freemason or part of the Illuminati.
Right.
There's pictures of him with the robe and the apron and things like that. So it definitely makes sense that he could very well have been part of these societies. And
So why the warnings, but it's just insane.
That could be part of, like they said, like they're using Disney as a means to karmically, and that's why they're even addressing the children. So like address the innocent primarily, but then it does also kind of cast them into this spill. But then, like you said, he did, he's also criticized as having been a Nazi sympathizer and stuff like that.
Yep.
But there are some aspects of globalism that came about from the World War. So and I have my personal heritage is German, so not to say that like you can see now even from this year how easy it is for good, well-intentioned people to fall into a narrative of just like wearing the mask. They've like in that on memes of people wearing masks and then people all doing the arm sign on from that campaign. So and ultimately, like it's World War II. Like it had its losses. Even Biden's like been equating that we've lost as many Americans to COVID with the 400,000. It's more than we lost in World War II. So even that's an interesting correlation of how Disney does speak politically, I guess, in that sense. And they do have that like kind of tap into current affairs. And like you're mentioning in Frozen, they had that whole part where Olaf keeps mentioning that there's memory in water. And that's a very powerful, like esoteric idea to be able to work with and be conscious of. And so for them to work that into the story for
proven. So it's also been scientifically proven.
Yeah. So it's so it's like bad. It's like educational. It's useful. It also like draws into a lot of questions, but some people might just dismiss it as like fantasy of the movie and whatever, and be done with it or not be too concerned. But yeah, they didn't have to put that in there, and they did.
Right.
So, and it takes a lot of time and energy and expense to make these movies. So obviously everything that they put in there is intentional, but yeah, I bet there are, just like in the government, there's, a lot of self-serving people who are selling out to the highest bidder and whatever. And then there's some good intentioned, like Mr. Smith goes to Washington type people that believe in the Constitution and that we all deserve a voice and all of that. And they want to fight for the little guy. So I think that Disney also attracts a lot of beautiful souls as well, that of people who do like carry that magic and innocence in them. And so I think there's plenty of that in the writer's room and artists as well, potentially. And so maybe it's just inherently that because of the power of Disney and influence of Disney, that they couldn't suppress the good message that would come out of it, And Disney has stood apart from other animation companies.
Yeah, big time.
In there, like there's been other attempts to start similar theme parks based on cartoon characters and things like that, or like Universal has Harry Potter and stuff now, and the Simpsons, but it's been hard to find a legacy like Disney has.
Right. Oh, there isn't one. There yeah, or none. Their influence is even seen. I mean, it's all over the world now. It's international. Right. Disney animation is international. I mean, Studio Ghibli is Disney's anime collaboration.
Oh, right.
Yeah. Allowed, you know what I mean? So it's pretty. It's great. It's great. And again, that the messages are strictly, in most movies, good 80-90% of movies, it's magic. Magic is real, So it's and it actually even is like legitimately magic, because I mean, we'll probably do another episode just on Disney and Disneyland alone, but there's aspects even about the design of Disney, like how they have
the hub and the statue with Walt Disney and Mickey in the very center court, and then you go through the castle, which is like a tunnel, and then they have the merry-go-round right behind that that's rotating constantly, basically, and that design is a Tesla coil that it channels the energy through the canal and then whirls it out, and that it's releasing negative ions, which are like health and joy and happiness promoting. So that's why you like feel so uplifted when you come through the castle and you see that merry-go-round and you're just like in that little encircle mid there. So they do work in a lot of that, and it is using real magic, because even like you're saying, it's internationally recognizable, that Mickey symbol, that, you know, that hidden Mickeys of the 2 ears and the circle, it's so simplified. And yet anywhere you see it, even if it wasn't intentionally Disney, if you saw those 2, you'd be like, oh, look, a hidden Mickey in my own coffee or whatever.
Right.
Like, it's that recognizable, and it instantly carries with all the like mimetic and properties and energies of the symbol of Mickey, and by Mickey being an icon of Disney, or, you know, the mascot of Disney, then it's all the things that Disney represents, which is, you know, like dreams come true and magic is real, and like being virtuous and helping your friends and all of those kinds of things. So just by seeing those 3 circles, it kind of exudes, just like a sigil does, that all that energy, and then it's planted all throughout the world. So even if there is that like malintent of people in the writer's room and the animators or whoever that's able to put those, you know, pedophilic or other like subliminal programming type things, that is kind of like there's a battle for good and evil even within the Disney, you know.
Right.
It's almost like a Jekyll and Hyde type creature.
It's called Disney magic. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
they even it's coined its own, like you said, it's coined its own energy.
Right.
You know, there's no, especially the park. And yeah, I want to do one on the park too. That'd be amazing.
Yeah.
You the second you walk in, everything is forgotten on the outside world, like on purpose. It's just it's amazing how they do that, and they try to pull off the same things with their films.
Right.
You know, especially now, especially Pixar. Pixar loves to tap into our emotions big time, and
Right.
expose our vulnerabilities. We most of these movies we walk out, even the small the mini cartoons in the beginning. I can't remember exactly what they're called.
Oh yeah, the Pixar shorts.
The Pixar shorts, yeah. Even those like tap into your emotions, and you're bawling before the movie even starts. You know,
Right.
So it's.
I love you too.
Right. Why all of a sudden they want to pull these emotions out of our kids? I don't know. Is it?
Well, it's just like
Can it be used for perversion? Yeah. Can it be used for good? Yes. At the same time. So maybe that's what it is, and maybe it's a fine balance of both right now. And maybe that's why Disney has been attacked in the last year. I don't know, but the Disney company is struggling. The only thing they have now is Disney Plus.
Yeah. They definitely weren't included in the bump up that Amazon and Netflix and all those other folks got.
Disney has been on the boot. Yeah, big time.
Yeah, but it's interesting that you even bring that up, that Pixar, one of their earliest movies earlier ones was Monsters, Inc. And that whole theme is about garnering energy from children, and then that they could get a lot of energy from fear, but they discovered that laughter was even more powerful, you know, but fear still had power. So, I mean, if there's going to be a mix of both, they might as well gather it all, you know. And we might even do another episode about Loosh and more of those like kind of esoteric topics. But, you know, there's like even scientific like CIA papers about like the energy that humans have in the Matrix, and, you know, people being a battery, you know, like this is a repetitive concept that they're presenting to us. And so, and even the Pixar theory that there's great videos that explain it like in totality, but basically it's that all Pixar movies exist in the same universe, and that it's the story of humans, animals, and machines or inanimate objects, each going through their personal or species evolution into their superpowers. So they have humans become the Incredibles, they have animals talking and like finding Nemo, she's able to read and do all these things that, or, you know, or Ratatouille, he's able to be a chef and have all these culinary things. And then Wall-E was able to have human emotions, and then even Toy Story, that the toys were able to become alive because of the attention given to them. And even in Coco, that's what kept people alive after death, was the attention that people gave to it. So basically all the Pixar movies are pointing to that the most powerful energy in the universe basically is human love and attention, because what we pay attention, where we focus is where our energy flows. So what we love or what we're concerned about, because even when we're having negative thoughts, it's still about something that we love, that we feel is threatened on the other side of that. So basically every fear is a masking of a love that's just
it goes back to the attachment, and how the attachment didn't work for Joe and for 22.
right.
That attachment was well intended through love, but that love became distorted and lost because it became an attachment as opposed to a genuine love. And
Right.
that's where the conflict happened. So yeah, it's an amazing message. It's an amazing message. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting too that I guess kind of to tie it back to just like 2020 and the timing of it and how this is applying moving forward is this whole year there's been a lot of criticisms of how some of the new rules and stipulations are dampening or suppressing the human spirit, that we're not able to show our faces to each other, we're not able to smile at a stranger, we're not able to meet our basic human needs of having human interaction and connection and purpose. A lot of people lost their purpose when they lost their jobs and works, or are shutting down their business and not having their basic human survival needs taken care of anymore. So all of that basically is a challenge or a struggle and battle for the soul, that they're telling you that we can give you the security basically if you ignore your soul and what seems right and good to you, as long as you follow the rules, and suppress and silence your soul, or give your soul to us in these new oaths and pledges and things they're wanting us to commit and agree to.
Right.
That yeah, so, and there's like wonderful Prince quotes and stuff, even where he's like doing award exceptions and he says like there's a war on for your soul, or it's a battle for your soul, like protect it, it's your most valuable asset. And so for Disney Pixar to come out with a movie just blatant, like that's the title, like it wasn't Joe, it wasn't 22, it was soul, like pay attention to this, like your soul, like this is what you need to mind and guard and value. And then even for Biden in his inauguration speech to mention soul was like a prominent word in it. Do you have the exact wording of how he said it?
I do actually. Yeah, pretty mind blowing. And again, there was a lot of parents who probably said, "Hey, kids, this is historic. This is a historic moment."
Mhm.
Not to mention these same kids just got done over the Christmas break a few weeks ago watching a movie called Soul.
Mhm.
So, so anyway, so it's just like I said, the thing with the monoliths. Oh, I know what that is because I saw it in Frozen. Oh, I
Mhm.
know what that is because I saw it in Soul. So
Right.
these are the things that, while they seem coincidental, I feel like they're not. So here's
Mhm.
the quote. So, and this is Joe Biden's inauguration speech. It requires, to overcome these challenges, to restore the soul and to secure the future of America requires more than words. It requires the most elusive of things in a democracy: unity. Unity. He said that 2 times.
Mm.
In another January in Washington, on New Year's Day, 1863, Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation. When he put pen to paper, the president said, "If my name ever goes down into history, it will be for this act, and my whole soul is in it." Then, so that's him quoting Abraham Lincoln. Then Joe Biden says, "My whole soul is in it." He says it to the
2
American
times.
people. Yeah. So it's just, you know, I'm not sure what he personally means by "my whole soul is in it." In my personal opinion, I think it's more, he's going to give it the old baseball try. He's going to give it his best shot.
Mhm.
but it's going to be for nothing, if you ask me. That's what it tells me, because not only that, but towards the middle and end of that speech, he basically ends it with kind of hinting, and I don't have this quote for quote, but telling us at the end of the day, or at the end of your life, if you're not living or standing up for something, then you're not really doing much with it. So make sure you get out there and you're doing basically what I'm doing. Basically, his message was sacrifice. You know,
Mhm.
to me, the entire thing was yes, unity, but more the only way we're going to have that unity is sacrifice. So that's what I got out of it. You know, so yeah, so just the wording, just the words alone, like, and again, like we have our kids watching these things because it's history. Every good parent should have our children watching history, you know, given the ways that we're able to watch it.
Mhm.
So I mean, it's just kind of coincidental timing. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, it definitely wouldn't be as lost on the kids as or it's less lost on the kids now that they've seen Soul, and like you said, they have those catchwords to pick out from, because depending on the age of the child, their attention span for the entire duration of the inauguration seal, these
Right.
people walking out and stuff, and memorizing all the names and stuff like that. But for that, they probably at least heard the inauguration speech, a lot of them, and those particular lines in particular. And for that was basically his pledge as president. So that was the thing he wanted people to be left with, was
Right.
unity. And then my whole soul is in this. And that, yeah, for it even to be tied with, and I didn't realize this until you had brought up this, like the correlation with the inauguration speech, that I didn't realize during their entire campaign that they had Biden Harris battle for the soul of America, or restore the soul of America 2020.
Oh,
That they had
wow.
like bumper stickers and t-shirts and all sorts of advertising things with that as their slogan. So that's been like kind of the theme all through 2020, I guess, of that we're on a battle for the soul of America. And then after the election on Christmas, I guess we won. We got soul. We got the soul release. And then
Holy
it
crap.
like got cemented on the day of the inauguration, where he then confirms and pledges this oath of my soul is in it. So it's interesting too that Joe had to die to discover his soul. So I don't, like you said, like it could be very well that he's just giving it the old college try and like, I'm going to do my best, and I know I got my work cut out for me, but I'm roll up my sleeves and we're in this together, and all those kinds of things.
Right.
That he does say too. But there was, yeah, a tone of that as well, that it's going to take sacrifice, and we all.
They also they have the same name.
Oh yeah, Joe. Yeah, Joe and Joe Biden.
Right.
So of all things,
I mean,
that it could have been.
yes. Are these coincidences? Yes. How many of them are coincidences, though? You know what I mean? I mean, it's I don't know, man. I don't know what it means. I know that we're in for an interesting next 4 years. I know that when I heard his speech, it tugged on my heart, and it tugged on my insides, and immediately this movie was thought of. So this is probably why we had intentions on doing this review.
Yeah, and it's funny that we waited, that incidentally, because we had other topics we wanted to record for you guys. But yeah, that we incidentally record the review right after the inauguration. Right. And we're able to include this element into it. So,
and we had no clue he was going to say the word soul 50 times in his
right. Turns out.
Yeah, turns
right.
out.
But so I guess there was a battle for the soul of America, and now Biden's on a mission to restore the soul of America, and him, by pledging his whole soul is in it, is he then the mascot or the emblem of the soul of America? And then if something were to happen to him, what does that do to the soul of America?
Right.
So I think it's beautiful to realize the individuality of the souls, and that they were so that they got to have their own number and identity kind of before they plopped onto Earth and got their own Earth pass. It wasn't just like the souls were immediately shooting off a machine onto the Earth, as if it was like all just pieces of the same thing. So like there's like this unity and uniting, but then there's also like this individualizing too that Soul did, of having your own earth pass, your own spark, you know, that I think they're trying to, that is being really suppressed in the modern climate and culture, just like how people are being silenced online and there's so much censorship and platforms being completely shut down, that whatever people's spark was is being told, no, that's wrong, you can't do
Right.
that, you know. And of course there are limits and boundaries that should exist in a society of what's appropriate behavior with one another. But you know, I forget who says it, but you know, like I may not agree with what you say, but I'll fight to the death your freedom to say
Right
it.
to say it, yeah.
You know, your right to say it. So it's important for us to have that and to recognize the soul in everyone, and that we are all pulling from the same source. So there is that unity in that, of like, we are in this together, that there's a beautiful benevolent being behind each of us that's trying to shine through, you know. And the more that we can create the space for people to express that it will, I believe. And just like 22 just need the right space to be
Right.
held for them to find their spark and purpose.
It's in Joe's shutting 22 up, or shutting 22 down, essentially, that she becomes a lost soul,
Right.
you know.
Right.
And I can imagine what that's like in real life now. We're all physically, things are being shut down. Emotionally, we're being shut down or silenced, given that kids don't have an outlet to go to school. And you know, whatever personal anecdotal situation you want to bring up, but you know, I don't think we mentioned the lost souls too much. We didn't touch on
Yeah, we
them.
didn't. I was just realizing I want to keep going a little bit to touch on that.
Yeah,
That's a
but
beautiful thing that Disney taught that too, that negative
yeah,
thoughts and not believing in yourself and all those things that can cycle you into a trap that you can
and that's
get stuck
exactly
in
what
it.
they do. They get stuck in a repetitive state.
Mhm.
It creeped me out a little bit, actually, the lost souls scenes.
Our
Yeah,
self-imposed prison that we can
right,
put ourselves in, and the monsters that we become because of it. And that the monster that she became, she was running away from him, like they weren't able to be touched by. So kind of like we do more to harm people by our absence than we do by our presence sometimes, I think. So
right.
like
It was hurt people hurt people.
yeah, hurt people. And you know, like self-expression is a necessary thing, where it's not just like a luxury where if you get around to it after you're done surviving, do a little bit of self-expression. Like um I think maybe it's in the Scene Gospels or something, where Jesus says that whatever you don't pull or express out of you will like destroy you or eat you alive
Right,
inside. So uh, people that aren't able to express themselves freely in a healthy, respectful manner,
right,
yeah, do become lost souls, and it does eat you up and destroy you. And then that thing that you were supposed to put out into the world doesn't exist and isn't able to be that leg up or help to, or inspiration or spark for somebody else that it was supposed
art,
to
yeah,
be, you know. So we're like creating this void or this like gap in the world and in the soul of America right now by silencing so much of it.
right. Wow, wow. This movie was it's so the way we went frame by frame to how it works in real life, and how it's working politically, how it's working um personally. It's they really pulled it off,
Yeah,
and
it's a masterpiece.
it's a masterpiece. It really is. But not only that, the music's amazing. I can't get over it. But yeah, it's is it a kids movie? What do you think?
I believe so, depending on where you know your child's at. Obviously, like read your own child, and a lot of things, like unfortunately we're exposed to so many dark things already, like characters die in a lot of cartoons, so that in itself isn't
No,
necessarily you know, unique. But you're
there's
right,
some message going over their heads.
it does
For
kind
sure.
of give, like, for a lot of families have turned from the church or traditional religion over recent years, as there's been this surge of new age, you know, spirituality. But even so, a lot of people, I think, are falling into just a general secular type belief of like science is their world. And so it's interesting that Disney did that to inject kind of this secular religion almost into the society
No
for
kidding.
children that aren't being taught about your soul or like what happens to you when you die and all that kind of stuff. If they're just going by the science, that now they have some concept of that.
No kidding. Very well said. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Let's rate it. Let's do that. I guess because
Ooh.
that's part of a review. So to get it. And how are we doing this? A, B, C, D, or?
I was thinking, like, what should be our rating system? Like marks? How many marks to
Right.
or mark-offs?
So let's do piano keys.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I don't know. The scale of 1 to 5 pianos. I don't know, man. But yeah.
How much jazzing did our jazzing meter?
Right. Yeah, the jazz meter. I'm gonna give the movie for sure. I think I'm gonna give it a solid 4 because, well, it was good. And again, jazz music's amazing. Jamie Foxx did a great job at voice acting,
Mhm.
falling into the manhole. You know, he was really for the movie being wasn't really dark, but they did have to kill a guy. You know what I mean? And then he did come back. So for them to be able to pull that off in such a silly way, still have the movie be entertaining, be able to pull off him getting mixed up with a cat, like that's the stupidest plot I've ever heard. But they pulled it off so good. They pulled it off amazingly. Like I couldn't be happy with the movie.
I'm listening. He falls in Mr. Mittens.
Right.
Go on.
Exactly. Go on. Exactly. Hear me out. Yeah. So yeah, I loved it, and the message obviously is perfect. I cannot wait to be able to watch it with the kids without crying.
And that's a scale of 1 to 10 though. So what number would you?
1 to 5. I was doing 1 to 5.
1 to 5. Oh, okay. I was like a 4. she's tough critic, you guys. Mildly impressed. Okay, 4 out of 5. Okay, for 4 out of 5 jazzing, I would say for like doing it as a general movie, I would say 4. Like as far as cinema goes, 4. But for doing its Disney thing, I would say 5. That it checked all of the boxes, and for like Pixar has its formula, and so there's some movies I've been disappointed by that, like The Good Dinosaur, like like here's a problem, and then the parent dies, and now he's on an adventure. Then you meet this character, toy, and make this character toy, and then exposition, toy. They're all going to die, traumatize the children, and then they win. So like it followed that formula, but in a much more subtle way.
Right. Yeah. The Good Dinosaur was just sad. Yeah, I loved it. I love Soul. 4 out of 5 jazz hands, not bad. Yeah, if you haven't seen it, please watch it, and now you have a better idea of where the movie's coming from, because a lot of the message did get lost for a lot of people, because like you said, it's a very secular world out there now. Not a lot of kids understand
astral plane. What?
Yeah, so yeah, beautifully done. Well, beautifully done. Any last thoughts before we wrap it up?
This is a non-sponsored video, but Soul is available exclusively on Disney Plus, and they need money right now. So you guys, help them out.
They're really struggling. Yeah. So yeah, thank you guys so much for listening, for watching. As always, your time is appreciated. And thank you, Ms. Kali, always for your hard work. This episode it's going to be a little bit different. If you haven't noticed yet, you will. I cannot wait to do Disneyland. If anybody who's watching this is interested in us doing the details of the park at Disneyland, and how the floor plans were laid out geometrically, pretty interesting subject. Let us know in the comments if that's something you guys be interested in, and we'll work on that. It'd be awesome.
Yeah, and we're building out our Patreon and starting to add more and more content there. So thank you to all of you supporting us on Patreon. And for any of us that haven't joined us yet, feel free to make suggestions in the comments below as well of anything that you'd like to see us do there, so we can entice you.
For sure. Take your shirt off. That's gonna be one. Oh man.
How did that
You know,
happen?
traumatized. I've been your host, Tootie O. Miss Kelly, thank you again so much. Thank you guys, and stay vigilant, stay focused, stay safe, and stay peaceful.